Hey kids, the lecture this week is going to come in two parts, and I'll try to keep it as short as I possibly can. But in this first one, I want to talk about three things. I want to revisit the little discussion about similes from last week. I want to talk about some scheduling issues, and then I want to talk a little bit about the peer review process that you're doing this week. So first off, similes. A simile says something is like something else. A is like B. And that's distinctive from a metaphor. A metaphor would say A is B. So a metaphor is a stronger construction, but because it's stronger, it also has a greater potential for misuse. These are rhetorical devices that writers use all the time, but I want to suggest to you that the creation of similes is something everybody does all the time. Here's an example. If you're trying to explain something to me, some concept, and I'm not getting it, and you've tried a number of ways to explain it sort of directly on to me, and I'm just not getting it, probably the very first thing you're going to say is, well, it's like something else that we both may know about. So you're going to try to make a similarity between something that I already have in my experience and the new concept you're trying to explain to me. In other words, you're going to create a simile. You're going to say, it's like that. You're going to do this instinctively. You're going to do this without being trained to do it. You do it all the time. So do I. So to think about similes as some foreign thing that only writers do, that's not the way to think about it. You do it all the time. Writers do it deliberately and for a specific reason, but the writers don't do it for any reasons different from the way that you and I would do it informally in speech. I think one of the things that students have some difficulties with in establishing the vocabulary of this class is you tend to think that it's a whole list of very strange things that only writers do, when in fact it's just a new set of names for things that we all do all the time. If I say, oh, I look out the tree, I look out my window and the tree appears to be angry at me, that's personification. You know, it's stuff that you do all the time. So that's the way to think about similes, and all of the other things, all the other elements you're working into your essays this week, it's stuff you do all the time. People do this. Human beings, as we communicate, do this. It's just we're learning the specific names to call them so that we can talk about them, because that's what educated people do. We create a language so we can talk about stuff, and we have the same concepts in common, so therefore we can understand each other. Secondly, I wanted to talk just a bit about scheduling. I know people are getting really overloaded at the middle of the semester. People always do. And quite often that's because we overload ourselves. I mean, if you're carrying 18 units and trying to work a job and raise a family, you ought to take a look at that, because that's not possible. No one can do that and keep your sanity intact. So, there's nothing I can do about that. But let me tell you what I've addressed in the class, in the design of this class. Someone said in the questions that you go to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and in your face-to-face class, your professor gives you an extensive amount of homework on a Tuesday that's due on a Thursday. Well, I know that's the case because I've taught face-to-face classes, and I've been in this business a long time, and I've taught tens of thousands of students, so that's not an uncommon occurrence. And so I knew that going in. So in the design of this class, you have absolutely nothing due until noon on Friday. Now, it makes sense to work earlier in the week and get some of that work done and get some of those posts up there. But in this class, each week begins on a Tuesday morning at 12:01 a.m., and you have absolutely nothing due until Friday at noon. So in the case of feeling overloaded, I would suggest where things are backing up is maybe in those classes where you're getting boatloads of homework on Tuesday that are due on Thursday. Maybe there's where the backlog of work is coming, and maybe you should approach those professors and talk to them about what they can do to help you there. Rather than asking me to keep extending deadlines and things like that, which simply is not going to happen. So just remember, you got nothing due until Friday at noon, absolutely nothing. And then what you have due Friday at noon is very little. Students tend to take, I think, half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour at most to get those forum posts up by noon on Friday. So all you really have to do for this class is find an hour somewhere to get those posts done. And I would suggest to you that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and half a day Friday, that's a long time to find an hour or even 45 minutes to get that little bit of work done. I do sympathize, and that's why I made this class, designed it the way I did. And even out of sympathy, when you were finding the 7 a.m. Friday deadline a little cumbersome, I expanded that to noon on Friday. But it's possibly not, and I'm just suggesting this for your thinking, it's possibly not the case that it's this class that's creating the backlog, but some other backlog happening somewhere else that you might be able to do something about. And again, I don't have any control of or even knowledge about those other things, except that I know the standard scenario that happens on the Tuesday, Thursday, or the Monday, Wednesday classes. There's nothing I can do about that. There might be something you could do about that. But I will suggest to you that this class is just about as user-friendly as it's possible to get. And I'll bet my next paycheck, if I had absolutely nothing due and then everything due on Sunday afternoon, there'd be people that would be complaining about that. Again, nothing I can do about any of that. You should keep in mind that for everything you write, I have to read it, and there's 58 of you. So in order for me to manage my workload at all and have any hope of keeping abreast of my own workload, it's just the way it is. So I'm suggesting possibly maybe take a look at some of your other classes or some of the other things in your life, because this class has a whole big chunk of time when you don't have to be doing anything. You probably should be doing things, but that's for you to manage. Okay, and then finally, the last thing that I'll talk about in this little video is the peer review process that's coming due this week. Peer review is an absolutely essential part of writing well and communicating well. Sometimes writers forget this. We tend to think it's just me sitting at home in my office in the corner producing my work, and that's the end of it. No, ladies and gentlemen, that's the beginning of it. As a scholar, we have an absolute obligation, and I would consider it a moral obligation, to come back to the community that nurtures us and share with that community the fruits of our labor. It's an obligation, absolute obligation. So what happens with peer review is you get to try your stuff out on a potential audience in a very low risk situation. And so I've set up groups. There are 4 students in a group, except I think one group has 5 in it. For you to do this process, I've given you some resources which you will use or not as you wish to help this be more efficient and more useful. But remember, in the real world where words and language change lives, the thought process, the drafting and the production of the work is the beginning of the process, and the process is not completed until we come back to the community and share with the community the fruits of our labor. That's an essential part of the process, and peer review helps you do that in a low-risk kind of a way. So back to the groups. Each group has 4 people in it except for one, and I'm willing to offer extra credit. Now please listen to what I'm about to say very carefully. I'm willing to appoint a group leader, one per group, and I'm willing to offer that person extra credit of 20 points for leading the discussion. Now, these are not giveaway points. If you are the group leader, you're going to have to keep the discussion going. You're going to have to offer advice. You're going to have to engage at a little bit higher level with your peers, and you're going to have to try to get people involved in the discussion who are not. You're going to have to email them and sort of try to get them involved, and you're going to have to guide and organize the discussion, and you're going to have to liaise closely with me. So these are not giveaway points. These are points that you earn by exercising a position of leadership in your group. It'll take you a little more time to do this, but I'm going to give you up to 20 points extra credit reward for doing so. So here's the rule. Please listen very carefully. The first person who emails me from each group, who requests me to appoint them as a group leader, I will do so. The first person to email me. Okay? If no one emails me from your group, if no one wants to do it, that's perfectly fine with me. But if there's someone who wants to take on this position of leadership and get the extra credit points, the first person who emails me I will appoint that person. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what your responsibilities and so forth are. So again, please listen very carefully. The first person from each group, and when you go on that discussion that says peer review discussion, you will see to which group you are assigned. And you can just say, this is Billy Bob from group number 4. I'd like to be the group leader. You send me an email, a message, or an email, it doesn't matter. Either a message on Canvas or an email to my college email address. The first person I hear from who wants the job will get it in each group. There are 14 groups, so there will be 14 group leaders, all of whom will get up to 20 points extra credit if you do the job. So that's it with peer review. I'm going to do another video talking about documentation. We're not going to be too anal about documentation this week, but next week you're going to have to formalize that documentation. Again, this is something you've covered in English 1A or Freshman Composition. I know this is not foreign territory to you, but we need to sharpen it up and get it done now. And finally, for the six folks who are going to send me an email saying how hard this all is, remember the work you do this week is work you won't have to do next week. So if you put in some time this week, you'll save you time next week. If you just decide not to do it because it's hard, then you're going to increase the amount of work you have to produce next week. And that's a choice you make. Again, you're adults, this is college, and I'm not your mother. So that's a choice you can make. But instead of complaining how hard it is, I'm going to suggest get it done, and then you'll be surprised at how easy next week is if you get some of the work done this week. That's the other point of the peer review thing. Okay, shutting up now. Watch for the documentation video in a little bit. We'll discuss it this week. Next week, we'll talk about how we get it done. Okay, thanks, bye.